Ever since Spider-Man Unlimited was announced, I've been seeing comments from you guys asking me to paint him. And I totally see why. If there's a Spider-Man figure that needs cel shading, it will be this one. But for some reason, Hasbro decided not to do it, making the figure look quite underwhelming.
Let's deconstruct this figure.
I also think that the colors on this figure are too dull. The red and blue are too similar in tone, making the colors blend into each other even though they're contrasting colors. But I have to say, they did a good job matching the red paint with the red plastic. The paint job is pretty clean too. The issue is that he's black and red with blue highlights in the cartoon, but Hasbro made him blue and red. He's also missing his signature black spot on his face. I know cel shading isn't for everyone, but I wonder if this figure would have been better if they made him black and red, with the black spot on his mask and skipped the blue highlights. Speaking of blue highlights, I hesitated on painting him because I'm not a huge fan of this style of cel shading. It just never translates well in figure form in my opinion. The symbiote Spider-Man figures looked okay, but I personally don't love the squiggly lines. I actually quite like what I've done to Magneto. It didn't look too tracksuit-like to me, so I'm gonna try something similar with Spider-Man Unlimited. So, hello, this is Ken. I like making things. Whether it's repainting my figures or making diorama displays, I love making things look awesome. My goal is to elevate my figures so they can shine on my display. Join my DIY venture as I ask myself the same question every week. Can I make it? For those who watched my Captain America video a few weeks ago, you saw that I was struggling with the wings. The paint just wouldn't stick. So I tried adding a base layer of acrylic marker on the surface first, then added the red paint over it. And that worked. But what surprised me was just how vibrant the red turned out. So I'm curious to see if acrylic markers are good for cel shading. I got this generic brand of acrylic markers. I want to test these out. Let me start with the red. The thing I like about these markers is that they're pretty easy to use right out of the gate. I don't have to worry about fraying bristles or running out of paint mid-stroke. It works just like a Sharpie marker. The great thing about this figure is that a lot of these red bits are raised, making this process so much easier than doing it on a flat surface. The coverage is pretty good too, but I wouldn't say it's a one-coater. There does seem to be some streak marks on the surface. Look, this is so much easier than doing it with a brush. But the color is leaning a bit too salmon to me. It's not the exact shade I'm going for. I've been tricked by the marker. Okay, to be fair, I totally plan on going over it with the red paint, just like what I did with Sam's wings. I just wanted to see if customizing figures with acrylic markers is doable. What I like is that the pigment is quite opaque, and it's also pretty thin. I can do multiple coats and there's no build-up like regular paint. Oh, I took his gauntlets off. It is so much easier to color them this way. I don't have to worry about accidentally coloring the arms. Okay, here's what he looks like with a few coats. Very vibrant, almost radioactive. It's kinda giving Spider-Man 2099. I'm gonna add the highlights next. I want the colors to be as saturated as they can be with the least amount of coats. That is why I'm adding this before I paint the rest of the figure black. Looking at reference images, the blue on Spider-Man Unlimited is actually not that vibrant. When you look at the character as a whole, the blue kinda pops. But if you focus on just the color, it's actually a very muted blue. almost like a grayish blue if that makes sense. My issue with the highlights is that there's no way I can achieve the same look on my figure. I can't make the blue shift when I turn the figure, so I'm gonna have to determine the angle I want the blue highlights to be shown at and stick with it. I decided to apply the blue highlights at 45 degrees. It'll give off a bit of that tracksuit look, but I really can't think of another way to do it that looks better. The highlight is pretty continuous in the cartoon. I don't want to break up the lines, so try and make them follow the shapes of the limbs so that they don't look too straight. Here's what it looks like right now. The blue is almost a one-coater, which is great, because the areas around his legs are quite hard to do. Now that the highlights are done, it is time to fine-tune the colors, starting with the red. The red right now looks a bit unsettling. It's a bit too close to flesh tone, like he got skinned or something. So I'm going to use the same red I always use. It's a little deeper, a bit more of a true red. I don't know what kind of magic this is. Normally the red paint dries a tad too dark, but the red looks so much more vibrant when I apply it over the marker. It's like the marker is amplifying the intensity of the paint. I'm really liking how it looks. It is a little bit harder to paint within the lines, but I wouldn't say it's that hard. But unlike the marker, the paint is much more sheer, so I do need multiple coats to achieve a nice even flat finish. Look at that, the red looks great. Let me quickly do some cleanup work with the blue, cleaning up the edges and covering up any splotches. Alright, all there's left is the black. I'm gonna use a paintbrush here because I need to get into those narrow crevices around the spider symbol. The marker is also too thick to get into those muscle definition. Ooh, you can just see how the black is affecting how we perceive red and blue. The red is looking even more vibrant, and the blue highlights look way more defined against the black. There's a little bit more I want to do with the black. Looking at reference images, there's a bit of black on his collarbone. This is quite tricky to add because this area here is very bumpy. It looks fine from the front, but when I turn the figure, the shape gets all wonky. I also added a bit of shadow under his chin. Now onto the most important and also the most intimidating part, the black spot on his face. The top half of this is pretty much a circle, which isn't too hard to do, but the bottom half is the tricky part. The best way I can describe this shape is that it's kinda shaped like a skeleton. Okay, what do you think? I think the shape is still a little off, but that's because the head itself is a bit wider than how he looked in the cartoon. Oh well. Ah, I forgot, his cape. In the show, the cape has a yellow tint to it. I'm gonna leave mine like this, because I do like the translucent plastic. I don't have confidence that painting over it will actually make it better. But what I can do is add the wet lines with the blue marker. Done. And last but not least, his eyes. His eyes aren't pure white. They have this kind of metallic yellow shine to them. Kinda like the iron spider but more subdued. So let me do that too. Alright, here's Spider-Man Unlimited all finished. First of all, these don't even look like the same figure anymore. I love how flat and vibrant the colors look. The spider insignia look quite muddy on the original figure. And now it pops despite it being more 2D. The bright red also looks fantastic. I love the vibrancy. It goes so well against the black. I'll be honest, I think the blue can be done better. I feel like if the blue highlights were a touch thicker, they would look even better. What do you think? Do you like what I've done? Let me know down below. And here's what he looks like next to Scarlet Spider. These two have very different styles, but somehow they complement each other very well. It makes me want to display them together. And speaking of, here's what he looks like with the Spider-Verse mini display. It's a surprisingly good fit. The dark colors and the bright orange go well with Spider-Man Unlimited. Alright, let's end this for the photo shoot. Spider-Man figures are the most stressful figures to paint. The reason is because Spider-Man fans are very passionate about their favorite Spider-Man designs. And to be very honest, I'm not too familiar with this iteration of Spider-Man. I was a diehard fan of the animated series, so I was waiting for him to find Mary Jane. That is why I was reluctant to accept this version of him. But now that I'm older, I'm starting to see the appeal, especially with this figure. He's so unique while also still looking like a Spider-Man. Now that I think about it, I think I prefer Spider-Man designs without the webbings, like Scarlet Spider and Spider-Man Unlimited. They look so much cooler than the traditional Spider-Man designs. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Give this video a like and subscribe to see more content like this. I've been working on something behind the scenes, and I'm hoping to get those out in the near future. And until then, stay inspired and I'll see you soon. I can make it, so can you.